I found the bug.
Shut your mouth! Did anyone invite this black idiot into my boardroom?
Sir, if you just look at the code.
Who do you think you are to teach me? Did those filthy people in the garbage dump teach you that?
The intern standing at the door was 23, black, and shaking.
We spent $50 million on experts. $50 million! And you, a trash, think you solved it?
Craig Whitmore sneered.
They only use their brains for decoration.
The whole room laughed. Fletcher Bennett placed a USB drive on the table. Then he walked out. That USB held 3 lines of code. They had no idea those 3 lines were about to change everything. But to understand how he got here, we need to go back to the very beginning. 3 months earlier, Fletcher Bennett stepped off a city bus with a backpack held together by duct tape. He stood on the sidewalk outside Caraway Technologies, 46 floors of glass and steel rising into the San Francisco fog. He'd never been inside a building taller than 4 stories. He grew up in Hunts Point, South Bronx. His mother, Diane, worked 2 jobs, morning shift at a laundromat, night shift stocking shelves at a grocery store. Their apartment had 1 bedroom. Fletcher slept on the couch until he was 17. There was no computer in the house, no Wi-Fi, no tutor, no safety net. What Fletcher had was the public library on Southern Boulevard. Every day after school, he walked 11 blocks to sit at the same cracked desktop and teach himself to code. He started with YouTube tutorials, then free courses, then open-source projects that nobody else wanted to touch. By the time he turned 20, he'd built 3 apps from that library chair. One of them caught the attention of a Caraway recruiter at a college job fair. "You built this?" the recruiter had asked, scrolling through Fletcher's portfolio. "Yes, ma'am." "On a library computer?" "Yes, ma'am." The internship offer arrived 2 weeks later. Diane cried when she read the letter. Fletcher didn't. He just folded it, slipped it into a plastic sleeve, and tucked it inside the USB drive case he carried everywhere. The same battered case that held every project, every note, every late-night breakthrough he'd ever saved to a borrowed flash drive. His first morning at Caraway, the receptionist looked at him twice before buzzing him in. The security guard checked his badge 3 times. When he finally reached the 42nd floor, engineering, a woman at the front desk pointed him toward a supply closet. "Coffee station's in there. Mugs are on the left." I'm the new intern." She blinked. "Oh," a pause. "Well, welcome, I guess." Nobody showed him his desk. Nobody gave him a tour. He found an empty chair near the printer room, sat down and opened his laptop. Craig Whitmore noticed him within the hour. Craig was a senior engineer, 15 years at Caraway, corner office, a reputation for destroying junior developers in code reviews for sport. He stopped in front of Fletcher's chair, arms crossed. "You the affirmative action kid?" Fletcher looked up. "I'm Fletcher, the new intern." "Same thing." Craig smirked and walked away. The pattern set itself fast. Fletcher was assigned nothing meaningful. Data entry, filing bug reports nobody read, organizing cables in the server room. When he asked for real work, Craig told him to stay in his lane. When he submitted code suggestions through the internal portal, they were rejected without review. When he sat in on team meetings, nobody acknowledged he was in the room. So Fletcher did what he'd always done. He worked in silence. Every night, after the office emptied, he stayed. He pulled the source code for Caraway's payment processing system, the crown jewel, the platform that handled 14 million transactions a day. He read it line by line. He mapped dependencies on notebook paper. He flagged inconsistencies and saved his findings to the USB drive, adding to the same collection of files that had traveled with him from the Bronx. Then the bug hit. It started small, a handful of transactions failing overnight. The engineering team dismissed it. Server load, they said. Temporary glitch. But the failures grew. Hundreds became thousands. Customers reported being charged twice, 3 times, not at all. Accounts showed balances that didn't exist. The system wasn't just glitching. It was breaking. Caraway's stock dropped 9% in a week. Victoria Caraway held an emergency board meeting. Derek Holloway, the CTO, assembled a war room of 200 engineers and brought in outside consultants from 3 different firms. They rebuilt modules. They rewrote frameworks. They burned through $10 million in the first month alone. The bug came back. Every time. Fletcher watched from his corner near the printer room. He'd already found it, 3 weeks into his own quiet investigation. The error lived deep in the core of the payment engine, buried under 8 years of patched-over code that nobody had bothered to clean. It was small, elegant almost, the kind of mistake that only someone reading every single line would catch. He wrote the fix on a Tuesday night. 3 lines. He tested it on a local copy. It worked. He tested it again. It worked again. He saved it to his USB drive, closed his laptop, and sat in the dark for a long time. He knew what would happen if he brought it to them. He'd seen enough to know how that room worked, who got heard, who got ignored, and why. But his mother's voice played in his head, the same thing she told him every morning before he left for the library. You don't hide what God gave you, baby. Not for nobody. The next morning, Fletcher walked into the boardroom. He had no idea that the moment he opened his mouth, he would set off a chain of events that would cost people their careers, their reputations, and every cent of their pride. We already know what happened in that boardroom. Derek told him to shut his mouth. Craig called him stupid. The room laughed. And Fletcher walked out, leaving the USB drive on the table. Nobody touched it. The drive sat there for 2 hours, through the rest of the meeting, through Derek's latest proposal to hire yet another consulting firm, through Craig's suggestion to rebuild the entire database architecture from scratch. Not one person picked it up. Not one person opened it. A janitor found it that evening and dropped it in the lost and found bin. Fletcher didn't go back for it. He didn't need to. He had copies, 3 backups on his laptop, 1 in his email drafts, 1 on a cloud drive he'd set up using the free tier. Growing up without anything had taught him one thing: always keep what matters in more than one place. What he didn't have was anyone willing to listen. The next 2 weeks were the worst of his internship. Craig spread the story around the office, how the intern had barged into a board meeting, how he'd claimed to have fixed a $50 million problem, how Derek had to physically remove him. The version that circulated was louder, crueler, and barely recognizable. Heard the diversity kid tried to teach the CTO how to code, someone whispered in the break room. Heard he didn't even have the right file, just an empty USB. Probably found a Stack Overflow answer and thought he was a genius. Fletcher heard all of it. He said nothing, but the silence cost him. He stopped eating lunch in the break room. He stopped using the shared kitchen. He timed his bathroom trips to avoid the hallways when they were crowded. One morning, he found a printout taped to his chair, a meme of a janitor holding a broom with the caption, "Senior Debug Engineer." Someone had drawn an arrow pointing to it and written, "Fletcher's promotion." He peeled it off, folded it, and put it in his pocket. He didn't throw it away. He kept it. The way you keep a receipt for something you plan to return. The one person who could have stopped it, Derek Holloway, did nothing. Not because he didn't know, because he wanted it. A humiliated intern was a quiet intern, and a quiet intern wouldn't bring up 3 lines of code again. Or so he thought. His access to the codebase was revoked. His desk was moved from the 42nd floor to a windowless room in the basement, officially reassigned to data migration support, which meant copying spreadsheets from one folder to another 8 hours a day. The demotion wasn't on paper. It didn't need to be. Everyone understood what it meant. Meanwhile, the bug kept eating. Caraway lost its partnership with Atlantic Federal Bank, a 12-year relationship, gone in a single phone call. 2 more enterprise clients followed. The stock dropped another 14%. Tech journalists started circling. "Is Caraway the next Theranos?" one headline read. Derek held press conferences promising a fix was weeks away. It wasn't. 50 million became 52, then 55. On a Thursday evening, A woman named Grace Sullivan knocked on the basement door. Grace was 58, senior principal engineer. She'd been at Caraway longer than Derek, longer than Craig, longer than most of the furniture. She had silver hair, reading glasses on a chain, and the kind of quiet authority that made loud men nervous. She also had a reputation for not suffering fools, which was why most people in the building left her alone. "You're Fletcher Bennett," she said, not a question. "Yes, ma'am. I heard what happened in the boardroom. I also heard what you claimed." She sat down across from him, folding her hands. "I want to see it." Fletcher studied her face for a long moment. He'd been burned once. The USB drive he'd left behind had been thrown in a bin. His reputation had been turned into a joke. Trust was expensive now. "Why?" "Because I've been staring at that codebase for 6 months and I can't find the bug. And because no one walks into a room full of people who hate them unless they're either crazy or right." She paused. "You don't look crazy." Fletcher opened his laptop. He pulled up the files, his line-by-line analysis, the dependency maps drawn on notebook paper and photographed, the 3 lines of code. Grace leaned forward. Her eyes moved across the screen once, twice. On the 3rd pass, she took off her glasses. "Oh my God. You see it? It's been there the whole time." Her voice was barely a whisper. 8 years. It's been sitting there for 8 years, and nobody... She stopped, looked at him. 3 lines. 3 lines. Grace sat back. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said something Fletcher hadn't heard since he'd arrived at Caraway Technologies. "You're brilliant, and I'm sorry no one told you that sooner." Fletcher felt his throat tighten. He swallowed it down. Grace wanted to take it straight to Victoria Caraway. Fletcher stopped her. "Not yet." "Fletcher, this fixes everything. The board needs to see it tonight." "And when they see it, whose name goes on it?" Fletcher's voice was steady, but his jaw was tight. "Because I watched Derek steal the air out of my lungs in that boardroom. I watched Craig turn me into a punchline. If this goes upstairs, I need 3 things." Grace waited. 1. My name on the commit. Not Derek's. Not the consulting team's. Mine. Done. 2. A public acknowledgement. In front of the same people who laughed. Grace nodded slowly. And 3. Nobody else gets treated the way I was treated. Not in this building. Not ever again. I want that in writing. Grace looked at him the way his mother looked at him when he said something that made her proud and broke her heart at the same time. "I'll make sure Victoria hears every word." That night, Grace took Fletcher's files home. She ran the fix on a sandboxed replica of the payment system. She ran it once. Clean. She ran it 5 more times. Clean every time. She recorded every test, screen captures, system logs, timestamps. She saved it all to a new folder on her own drive, labeled it with the date, and locked it with a password only she knew. Then she sat at her kitchen table and cried. Not because the fix worked, but because a 23-year-old kid from the Bronx had done in 11 weeks what 200 engineers and $55 million couldn't do in 8 months. And nobody had even said thank you. The next morning, Grace walked into Victoria Caraway's office. She had no appointment. She had no invitation, but she had proof, and proof doesn't need permission. Victoria Caraway didn't look up when Grace walked in. She was on her 3rd coffee, reading a legal brief about a class action lawsuit from customers whose transactions had vanished into the system. "I don't have time, Grace." "You have time for this." Grace placed her laptop on the desk, turned the screen around, and pressed play. Victoria watched the recording. 6 consecutive test runs. Each one clean, each one showing the payment system running the way it hadn't run in 8 months. System logs scrolled past. Green lights across the board. No errors, no crashes, no ghost transactions. Victoria set her coffee down. "Who fixed it?" "Fletcher Bennett." "Who?" "The intern Derek threw out of the boardroom." Victoria's face went still. She leaned forward, replayed the video from the beginning, and watched every second again. Then she closed the laptop. "Get him in here." Grace shook her head. He has conditions. Conditions? Victoria almost smiled. Almost. He's an intern. He's the only person in this building who solved your problem, and he has conditions. I suggest you hear them. Grace laid them out. Fletcher's name on the fix, a public acknowledgement in front of the same people who laughed at him, and a written commitment that no employee would be treated the way he'd been treated. Victoria listened without interrupting. When Grace finished, the room was quiet for a long time. How old is he? 23. And he came up with those conditions himself? Every word. Victoria leaned back. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not sympathy, not yet. Something closer to recognition. The kind that comes when you realize you've been looking at the wrong scoreboard. Set up a meeting. Just the three of us. No Derek, no Craig. Tomorrow morning. The meeting happened at 7 a.m. in a small conference room on the 38th floor. No cameras, no audience, no mahogany table. Just 3 chairs and a window facing east. Fletcher arrived in the same wrinkled shirt he always wore. Victoria noticed. She also noticed his hands, steady, folded in his lap, no fidgeting. She'd sat across from billionaires who couldn't manage that. Grace showed me your work, Victoria began. I have questions. Go ahead. You found this bug in, 3 weeks? 11 days. I spent the rest of the time testing and documenting. Victoria exhaled. We had 200 people on this. External firms. Military-grade diagnostics. $55 million. They were rebuilding walls, Fletcher said. The crack was in the foundation. You don't fix a foundation by adding floors. The room went quiet. Grace pressed her lips together to keep from smiling. Victoria studied Fletcher for a long moment. Then she said, "Tell me about the conditions." Fletcher repeated them, word for word. The same way he'd told Grace. No louder, no softer. When he got to the third one, Victoria stopped him. "You're asking me to change company culture. That's not a bug fix." "No, ma'am. It's harder than a bug fix. But you asked what I want." Victoria turned to Grace. "You vouch for him?" "Completely." "And if I say no to the third condition?" Fletcher stood up. "Then I walk, and the bug stays." He said it without anger, without threat, the way you state a fact about the weather. Grace held her breath. Victoria held her gaze. 10 seconds passed. "Sit down, Fletcher." He sat. "I'll honor all 3, but I need you to understand. When this goes public, and it will go public, you'll be standing in front of people who wanted you gone. Can you handle that?" "I've been handling it since I got here." Victoria nodded. For the first time since the crisis began, she looked like someone who'd found solid ground. She walked Fletcher to the door. Before he left, she said something he didn't expect. "Fletcher, how did you learn to negotiate like that? 3 conditions, no flinching, no room for compromise. That's not something they teach interns." Fletcher paused in the doorway. "My mother raised me alone in the South Bronx, ma'am. Every month was a negotiation. With landlords, with bill collectors, with school administrators who didn't think her son belonged in the gifted program. She taught me that if you don't name what you're worth, someone else will name it for you. And they'll always go low." Victoria said nothing. She just nodded, slowly, the way people nod when they've just learned something they should have known a long time ago. Fletcher walked out. Behind him, Victoria picked up her phone and called the head of legal. "I need a written policy draft on my desk by morning. Employee dignity protections. Make it ironclad." That evening, Fletcher called his mother. It was past 11 in New York, but Diane Bennett answered on the first ring. She always did. "How's my baby?" "Mama, I think it's going to be okay." "You think, or you know?" Fletcher laughed. A real one, the kind that loosened something in his chest you didn't know was clenched. "I know." "Then why you sound like you're about to cry?" "Because the lady in charge listened. She actually listened." Diane was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, "Don't let them steal your light, baby. Not for nobody." "I won't, Mama." He hung up, leaned back in his chair in the basement office and looked at the ceiling. The USB drive sat on the desk beside his laptop, the same drive that had traveled from a public library in the Bronx to a boardroom in San Francisco, been tossed in a lost and found bin, and now held the evidence that could save a billion-dollar company. It was scratched. The cap didn't fit right anymore. The lanyard clip was bent. But everything inside it worked perfectly. The next morning, Grace met Fletcher in the lobby with 2 cups of coffee and a look on her face he hadn't seen before. "What happened?" he asked. "Victoria called an emergency meeting of the full engineering team. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., main auditorium." "Derek's team?" "Everyone, including Derek, including Craig." Grace handed in the coffee. "She's deploying the fix tonight, quietly. If it works on the live system, and we both know it will, she's making the announcement tomorrow in front of the entire company." Fletcher's stomach turned, not from fear, from the weight of what was coming. "And Fletcher?" Grace lowered her voice. "She's putting your name on the deployment log. First line, time-stamped." Fletcher wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. The warmth spread through his palms, into his wrists, up through his arms. It was the first warm thing he'd felt in this building that wasn't coming from a machine. That night, at 11:47 p.m., 3 lines of code went live on Caraway's payment system. By midnight, 14 million transactions were processing without a single error. And by morning, 200 engineers would learn that the intern they laughed out of the room had just saved the company. The fix worked. By 6 a.m., Caraway's payment system had processed over 9 million transactions without a single failure. The dashboards glowed green for the first time in 8 months. Server load dropped. Error logs went silent. Customer complaints stopped midstream, like someone had turned off a faucet. Victoria Caraway stood in the server monitoring room with her phone in one hand and a printout of the deployment log in the other. Fletcher Bennett's name sat at the top, time-stamped, permanent. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt sick, because she knew what was about to happen in the auditorium, and she knew it would be ugly. At 9 a.m., 312 Caraway employees filed into the main auditorium on the ground floor. Engineers, project managers, designers, executives, everyone who'd had anything to do with the payment system crisis. Derek Holloway sat in the front row, legs crossed, checking his phone. Craig Whitmore sat 2 seats down, cracking his knuckles. Neither of them knew. Victoria walked to the podium. No slides, no notes. 8 months ago, our payment system failed. Since then, we've spent $55 million, lost 3 enterprise clients, and watched our stock lose 31% of its value. She paused. Last night, the bug was fixed. A murmur swept through the room. Derek sat up straighter. Craig stopped cracking his knuckles. "The fix," Victoria continued, "was 3 lines of code." Silence. "It was written by Fletcher Bennett, our intern." The silence turned into something else. Something between confusion and disbelief. Heads turned. People looked around for Fletcher. He was standing in the back, near the exit door, hands in his pockets. Derek's face lost its color. He leaned toward Craig and whispered something. Craig shook his head. "I want to be clear about something," Victoria said. "Fletcher brought this solution to senior leadership weeks ago. He was dismissed. He was ridiculed. He was removed from a meeting and reassigned to the basement." She looked directly at the front row. "That is not what this company is supposed to be." Derek stood up. "Victoria, I think there's some context." "Sit down, Derek." He sat. The auditorium erupted after that. Some people applauded. Some sat in stunned silence. A few junior engineers in the back stood up, trying to see Fletcher. But the real explosion happened after the meeting ended, when Derek Holloway walked into his office and found his access badge deactivated. He didn't panic. Not yet. He went to Victoria's office. Her assistant told him she was unavailable. He went to the CTO conference room. It was locked. He called Craig. Craig didn't pick up. He called the head of HR. Voicemail. He called his own assistant. She answered, but her voice was different. Careful, distant, The voice people use when they already know you're finished but can't say it yet. Then Derek did what Derek always did when he felt threatened. He took credit. At 2:17 p.m., Derek uploaded a post to his LinkedIn from the parking garage. Proud to announce that after months of tireless work, my team and I have resolved the critical infrastructure issue at Caraway Technologies. Leadership is about staying the course. He tagged the company. He tagged 3 consulting firms. He did not tag Fletcher Bennett. The post got 400 likes in an hour. But someone in that auditorium had been recording. A junior engineer named Tessa Holt, 26, 2 years at Caraway, quiet, overlooked, had captured Victoria's entire speech on her phone, including the part where she named Fletcher, including the part where she called out Derek, including the part where Derek was told to sit down. Tessa uploaded it at 3:45 p.m. She didn't add a caption. She didn't need to. By midnight, the video had 2 million views. By the next morning, it had 12 million. The hashtag #JusticeForFletcher was trending in 14 countries. Tech Twitter exploded. LinkedIn imploded. Every major outlet wanted the story. CNN, Bloomberg, Wired, The Verge. Derek's self-congratulatory post was screenshotted, circled, and reposted thousands of times next to the video of Victoria saying Fletcher's name. The contrast was devastating. Comment sections flooded with rage. This man spent $55 million of company money and then tried to steal credit from a 23-year-old intern. The real bug at Caraway isn't in the code, it's in the C-suite. Former Caraway employees started posting their own stories. Patterns of discrimination, stolen credit, retaliation. A thread titled, "Caraway's Culture Problem Didn't Start with Fletcher," hit 40,000 retweets in 6 hours. Derek hired a PR firm. They drafted a statement calling the video misleading and taken out of context. It made things worse. Craig Whitmore deleted all his social media accounts. 3 of the consulting firms Derek had tagged issued statements distancing themselves from the project. One of them publicly apologized for failing to identify a fix that, in their words, should have been found in the first week. Inside Caraway, the pressure became unbearable. The board of directors, 7 people who had been mostly silent during the crisis, demanded a full internal investigation. Shareholders filed formal complaints. 2 institutional investors threatened to pull out unless the company demonstrated accountability at the leadership level. A leaked internal email showed Derek had flagged Fletcher's codebase access for removal the day after the boardroom incident. Proof that the demotion to the basement wasn't random. It was retaliation. Victoria called Fletcher into her office. "The board wants a hearing, open session, live streamed to all employees and shareholders." Fletcher nodded. "When?" "Friday." "Will Derek be there?" "Derek, Craig, and every senior engineer who was in that war room. The board wants answers, and they want them from you." Fletcher looked out the window. The fog had lifted. The city was sharp and clear, all glass and angles and light. "I'll be there." "Fletcher." Victoria hesitated. "They're going to come after you. Derek's lawyers are already involved. They'll try to discredit your work, question your credentials, challenge the timeline. They'll say you accessed code you weren't authorized to touch. They'll say Grace helped you fabricate evidence. Are you ready for that?" Fletcher reached into his pocket and pulled out the USB drive. He set it on Victoria's desk, the same way he'd set it on the boardroom table weeks ago. Scratched, bent clip, cap that didn't fit. Everything's on there. Every line of analysis, every test, every timestamp, every note I wrote on notebook paper and photographed at 2 in the morning. He paused. "I've been ready since the day I walked into this building." Victoria picked up the drive, held it in her palm. It weighed almost nothing. "Grace also has recordings of every test run," Fletcher added. "Screen captures, system logs, her own annotations, time-stamped independently. So there are 2 sets of evidence. 3. I sent a copy to my own email the night I wrote the fix, before the boardroom meeting, before Derek ever saw it." Victoria looked at him. 23 years old, wrinkled shirt, steady hands. 3 layers of evidence prepared by someone who'd learned, long before he ever set foot in a corporate building, that people like him had to prove things twice as hard and 3 times as often. "Friday it is," she said. Okay, real talk. This kid fixed what nobody could. Got clowned for it, and still had the brain to triple back up everything. Not because he's paranoid, because he grew up knowing. Nobody's giving him the benefit of the doubt. That's not inspiring. That's exhausting. And that's the part y'all don't want to talk about. The hearing was set for Friday at 10 a.m. The whole company would be watching. The whole internet would be watching. And Fletcher Bennett, the intern from the Bronx, the kid from the library, the coffee runner, the diversity hire, the basement exile, would be standing at the center of it all. With a scratched USB drive and the truth. But Derek Holloway wasn't going to go down quietly. And what he did in the 48 hours before that hearing would prove that some people will burn an entire building to the ground before they let a black kid get the credit he deserves. Derek Holloway didn't sleep for 2 days. On Wednesday night, he called Craig Whitmore from a burner phone he'd bought at a gas station. Craig picked up on the 5th ring. "We need to get our story straight." "There is no story, Derek. The kid has timestamps. Timestamps can be faked. By a 23-year-old intern? On 3 separate platforms? With a senior engineer as a witness?" Craig's voice cracked. "I'm not going down for this. I'll tell them exactly what happened. If you do that, I'll tell them you were the one who revoked his codebase access. I'll tell them you're the one who moved him to the basement." The line went quiet. Then Craig said, "You told me to do that." "Prove it." Craig hung up. On Thursday morning, Derek's lawyers filed a motion to postpone the hearing, citing incomplete evidence review. The board denied it within the hour. That afternoon, Derek tried a different approach. He sent a private email to 3 board members suggesting that Fletcher had accessed proprietary code without authorization, and that the real story was one of corporate espionage, not innovation. The board forwarded the email to Victoria. Victoria forwarded it to her legal team. By Thursday evening, Derek's attempt to discredit Fletcher had become exhibit number 4 in the internal investigation. Friday, 10 a.m., the main auditorium. Every seat was taken. Employees lined the walls. 2 cameras live-streamed to remote offices in Austin, New York, and London. A 3rd camera fed the company's public investor channel. Someone had leaked the stream link. 40,000 external viewers were watching before the hearing even started. The board sat at a long table on the stage. 7 chairs. Victoria Caraway sat at the end, not in the center. This wasn't her show. This was the board's. Derek walked in wearing a suit that cost more than Fletcher's annual rent. He sat at the respondents' table with his lawyer, a gray-haired man from a firm that charged $900 an hour. Derek's jaw was set. His leg bounced under the table. Craig Whitmore sat 3 rows back. No lawyer, no allies. He looked like a man waiting for a building to fall on him. Fletcher entered last. Wrinkled shirt. Same one. Grace Sullivan walked beside him. Silver hair, reading glasses on the chain, back straight. They sat at the presenter's table. No lawyer, no PR team. Just a laptop, a USB drive, and a folder of printed evidence. The board chair, a woman named Eleanor Reed, opened the proceedings. "Mr. Bennett, walk us through your timeline, from the beginning." Fletcher spoke for 22 minutes. No notes, no slides for the first half, just his voice, steady, clear, unhurried. He described arriving at Caraway, the assignments he was given, the access he was denied, the nights he spent reading the code base after everyone went home, the moment he found the bug, the analysis he built, the fix he wrote, the boardroom meeting where he was laughed out. Then he opened his laptop. "This is the commit log from my personal development environment. The fix was written on March 12th at 11:43 p.m. He clicked. "This is the email I sent to myself that same night, with the code attached. Gmail timestamp, 11:58 p.m., March 12th. He clicked again. "This is Grace Sullivan's independent test. run on March 26th. 6 consecutive clean runs, screen captured with system clock visible. He turned the screen toward the board. Mr. Holloway presented this same code to the company on April 9th, 28 days after I wrote it. The room was silent. 40,000 people online were silent. Derek's lawyer whispered something in his ear. Derek shook his head. Eleanor Reed turned to Derek. "Mr. Holloway, your response." Derek stood. He buttoned his jacket. He cleared his throat. And then he did what men like Derek always do when the walls close in. He attacked. With all due respect to the board, this young man accessed systems he was never authorized to touch. His so-called fix was reckless. He bypassed every protocol, every review process, every safety check this company has in place. The fact that it worked doesn't change the fact that it was unauthorized. "Mr. Holloway," Eleanor said, "did you or did you not present Mr. Bennett's code as your own work?" "I presented a solution that my team—" "Your team? Which member of your team wrote those 3 lines?" Derek opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "That's what I thought," Eleanor said. Craig Whitmore stood up from the 3rd row. Every head turned. "I need to say something." His lawyer, sitting somewhere in the back, must have been screaming internally, but Craig was already talking. "Derek told me to revoke Fletcher's access. Derek told me to move him to the basement. Derek told me to make sure he never got near a code review again." Craig's voice shook. "I did all of it, and I'm not proud of it, but I'm not taking the fall for a man who stole a kid's work and called it leadership." Derek's face went white. His lawyer put a hand on his arm. Derek shoved it off. "This is a circus," Derek said. "You're going to take the word of a disgruntled engineer and an intern over—" "Over what?" Grace Sullivan's voice cut through the room like a blade. She stood. "Over a CTO who spent $55 million of shareholder money, couldn't find a bug that a 23-year-old found in 11 days, and then stole his solution?" Grace walked to the front. She placed her own folder on the board's table. Test recordings, system logs, annotated analysis, and one document that nobody had seen before. "This," she said, "is an internal email from Derek Holloway to Craig Whitmore, sent the morning after the boardroom incident. It reads, 'Make sure the intern's access is gone by end of day, and get that USB out of Lost and Found. I don't want any trace of whatever he thinks he found.'" The auditorium gasped. 40,000 viewers online collectively lost their minds. The live stream chat became a waterfall. Eleanor Reed removed her glasses. "Mr. Holloway, you are relieved of your position effective immediately. The board will refer this matter to outside counsel for further review." She paused. "Mr. Whitmore, your cooperation is noted, but your role in the retaliation will also be reviewed." Then she turned to Fletcher. "Mr. Bennett, on behalf of this board and on behalf of this company, I am sorry. What happened to you should not have happened, and it will not happen again." Fletcher nodded. His hands were steady, his eyes were dry. But under the table, his right hand was gripping the USB drive so tightly that the bent clip pressed into his palm, leaving a mark he would carry for days. He spoke. Not loudly, not angrily. The room leaned in to hear him. "I didn't need a seat at the table. I just needed someone to stop laughing long enough to listen." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And then, from somewhere in the back, someone started clapping. Then another. Then another. Until the entire auditorium was on its feet, and the live stream chat was nothing but Fletcher's name, over and over and over. I've told a lot of these stories, but this one hit different. Fletcher didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't throw it in their faces. He just asked to be heard. That's it. That's literally all he wanted. And it took all of this for a room full of grown adults to do something that simple. Let that sink in. Derek Holloway was escorted from the building at 11:47 a.m. His badge was collected at the front desk. His parking space was reassigned by noon. But for Fletcher Bennett, the hardest part wasn't winning. It was deciding what to do with a victory he never should have had to fight for. 2 days after the hearing, Victoria Caraway asked Fletcher to meet her on the 46th floor. Not in a conference room, not in her office. On the rooftop terrace that only executives were supposed to use. It was early. The sun was low over the bay. The city looked like it was still waking up. "I'm not going to give you a speech," Victoria said. "You've heard enough speeches." Fletcher leaned against the railing. "Then what is this?" "An offer." Victoria handed him a folder. Inside was a single document, a proposal to create a new division within Caraway Technologies. The name printed at the top, Bennett Innovation Lab. Fletcher stared at it, read it again. His name, on a division, inside the company that had sent him to the basement. "Co-founder and lead engineer," Victoria said. "Full autonomy, your own team, your own budget, report directly to me." Fletcher closed the folder. "I have a condition." Victoria almost laughed. "Of course you do. The lab runs a mentorship program. Every quarter we bring in interns from underserved communities, kids who taught themselves to code at public libraries, kids who couldn't afford a boot camp, kids nobody's betting on." He paused. "And they don't fetch coffee. They don't organize cables. They ship code from day one." Victoria nodded slowly. "Done. And Grace Sullivan is co-director. Already planned on it. She threatened to resign if I didn't include her." For the first time in months, Fletcher smiled. Not the polite, careful smile he wore at the office. A real one. The kind that starts in the chest before it reaches the face. The announcement went out the following Monday. Caraway Technologies issued a public statement, not drafted by a PR firm, not vetted by lawyers, but written by Victoria herself. It named Fletcher. It named what happened to him. It named the failures of leadership that allowed it. And it named the changes being made, starting with the Bennett Innovation Lab and a company-wide overhaul of its intern and junior employee programs. The stock went up 11% in a week. Not because of the announcement itself, but because Wall Street understood what it meant. The system was fixed. The leadership was fixed. And the person who'd fixed both of them was now building something new. Grace moved into the office next to Fletcher's on the 42nd floor. The same floor where, 4 months earlier, a receptionist had pointed him toward the coffee station. The office had a window. Grace put a plant on the sill and taped a photo to the wall. Her father, age 30, standing outside an IBM building in 1971. He was the only black man in the frame. He was smiling. He never made it past junior engineer. "He would have loved you," Grace told Fletcher. "I think I would have loved him too." The first cohort of the mentorship program arrived on a Tuesday in September. 12 interns, all from backgrounds that looked like Fletcher's: public housing, free lunch programs, community college, self-taught. One of them had learned to code on a phone. Another had built a functioning app using only the computers at a homeless shelter. Fletcher stood in front of them, in the same wrinkled shirt. Grace told him to buy a new one. He said no. He said the shirt was the point. "Nobody in this room is here because of a favor," he told them. "You're here because someone saw your work and decided it mattered. That's it. That's the only reason any of us should be anywhere." He looked around the room. 11 faces looked back at him, some nervous, some excited, some trying very hard to look like they weren't about to cry. One face wasn't looking at him at all. A girl in the back corner. 17. Black. Headphones around her neck. She was staring at her laptop screen, fingers moving, already writing code before the orientation was even over. Fletcher watched her for a moment. Then he walked over, pulled up a chair, and sat down beside her. "What are you working on?" She didn't look up. "Fixing a memory allocation issue in an open-source project. Been stuck on it for 2 weeks." "Can I see?" She turned the screen toward him. Fletcher looked at her code for 30 seconds. Then he pointed to a line near the bottom. "There, you're releasing the resource before the callback completes." Her eyes went wide. That's... Wait. She stared at the screen. Oh my God, that's it. That's literally one line. Fletcher smiled. Sometimes it's just one line. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. How did you know? Because I've been where you are, and nobody stopped long enough to sit down and look. He pulled the USB drive from his pocket, the scratched one, the one with the bent clip and the cap that didn't fit. He set it on the desk between them. This is where it started for me. Public library. Borrowed computer. Everything I ever learned is on this drive. He pushed it toward her. I want you to have it. I can't take this. You're not taking it. I'm passing it. He leaned back. Fill it up with your own work. And when you find someone like you, someone nobody's listening to, you pass it again. She held the drive in both hands. It weighed almost nothing, but she held it like it was the heaviest thing in the world. That evening, Fletcher's mother came to visit the office. Diane Bennett walked through the glass doors of Caraway Technologies in a dress she'd bought for the occasion, the first new dress she'd owned in 3 years. Grace met her in the lobby with flowers. Victoria shook her hand and said, "Your son changed this company." Diane nodded politely. Then she looked at Fletcher, standing by the elevator in his wrinkled shirt, and said what she always said. "Don't let them steal your light, baby." They didn't, Mama. She hugged him in the middle of the lobby. Security guards looked away. Receptionists pretended to type. Grace took off her glasses and wiped her eyes, and Fletcher held on. The way you hold on to something you almost lost. The way you hold on when you finally realize that the fight is over, and you're still standing, and the people who laughed are gone, and the people who believed are right here. The USB drive was in the hands of a 17-year-old girl, 3 floors up. The code was in the system. The name was on the door. And the light his mother told him to protect every single morning of his life, was brighter than it had ever been. If this story made you feel something, leave a comment. Tell me, have you ever been in a room where nobody believed you? What did you do? Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because stories like Fletcher's happen every day, and someone needs to tell them.